So we're back. I just want to say, because I just logged in and I just saw the ban list and it's amazing. I love this ban list. Max C hit, obviously only the two. Secret Village, this card was a bane because it's just a consistent part of combos, unlike anti-spell. You can technically search and set anti-spell, but yeah, Summon Limit I think is a great hit. I just like all these hits and unlimits. Anyways, that's not the point of this video. I made a funny striker deck list, unironically playing a couple of aces. This is what I used to climb. And it went surprisingly well. Actually, we're gonna stop. Okay, we're back. I did some math so that I could compare statistics because I started using this at Master 5. So I had a previous deck list that was sort of like this, but I wasn't playing the enablers for like getting kin and a couple of aces for thrust and talents. And that went rather poorly. Before I was on this deck list, I played 152 games, and I won 79 of them, which is like a 51.9% win rate. I climbed up to like Master 4 and D-ranked, and then I switched to a couple of aces, and proceeded to play 53 games to get to Master 1. So in Master, this had a 67.9% win rate, this build, in Master. And let me just run down the basic concept of this build. I'm going to assume you're a little familiar with the deck as it runs. So the core conceit of the deck is that we have talents and thrust, and we want to turn these on in particular, and we want to use advantageous cards for us to do so. So that means making our opponent activate a monster effect. And I found the most effective monsters to do this are a couple of aces and Gen and Ken. Particularly Gen lets us gain our own advantage. It lets you draw deeper in order to try to find talents, thrust, or engage. Those are the big cards you want to be able to get to. And a couple of aces is one, which is why the deck is built with so much effect negation like it is. So obviously you can see we're running Chalice, Widow, Anchor, Imperm, and Droplet. Droplet obviously is the worst one here for that. But the idea is it's kind of heads I win, tails you lose sort of moment. Ideally if you've drawn Tactics or Thrust. And if you get heads, you just draw 2 cards, which is good. And sometimes they'll just burn an ash on it. As a side note, in the event that like you couple of aces win the coin toss, they ash it. Set Imperm I found was just good enough. I never thought I wanted to play like Black Goat Laughs or anything like that. Imperm being like an activatable hand trap, it just fits really nicely into what the deck wants to do. We're obviously not playing Maxi or anything. I don't think we have room for it, as funny as that sounds. And I still think this deck like breaks boards pretty solidly. Final Bringer of the End Times and like Forbidden Droplet are important cards for like getting monsters off of your side of the field that you steal with Widow Anchor if you need to activate more Sky Striker spells on your opponent's turn in particular. But yeah, we'll run through the specific card choices. So a lot of them are around making a couple of aces not painful to draw. Like I said, Chalice in particular, and Imperm. Normally I'm not usually playing Imperm in a deck list like this for Striker, but I am playing it in this one, and it's not just because it's a thrust target. It's because also if you start, you're going first, you have like a couple of aces in hand. You start with a couple of aces. If you summon it to their side, Imperm, ideally you have like thrust talents behind it to back it up. Sometimes, because of the way this deck is built, you kind of just need to flip heads on a couple of aces or lose the game. I was in that situation a couple of times. Sometimes you get heads, and then you just kind of win the game, and the other times you don't. A couple of aces is a funny card. It's also a body, importantly, so sometimes like you'll have done like Gen or Ken and then activate get the heads, you get a body, which lets you make Camellia, which can be pretty huge, instead of being stuck going to All Mirage. But we'll talk extra deck theory in a moment. Let's actually run through the deck list. Couple of aces. So you flip a coin. Heads, it summons to your side. Tails, it flips, summons to your opponents. Once it's summoned by its own effect, it activates its effect to draw 2 cards. Then we have Gen and Ken. They summon each other. If they're summoned by the other one's effect, when Gen is summoned by Ken, you get to... Your opponent has to discard a card from their hand. This can be relevant in some like grind game states, because you can just go to the end of the battle phase and these will both bounce back to hand. And then for Ken, when you summon him, your opponent makes you draw 2, discard 1. Usually you'll have like a redundant card in hand if you do that, whether it be one of a monster you can't normal summon, or like an extra spell that has a hard once per turn on it. I didn't have too much of a problem. Rhoda is just here for consistency. Sometimes you'll search for Ray, sometimes you'll search for Gen. Usually you'll search for Gen or Ken. Ken, you're never searching for Ken unless something really weird is happening. But sometimes discarding cards from your opponent's hands can just be solid. I had like a game against Flu where that came up, where I was like, oh, I can make them start discarding. Like they had Apex Avion in hand. And I was like, oh, I can just start making them discard cards from hand. And then they surrendered at that position. We obviously have 3 engage. The powerful spell. This is around what you're trying to enable with talents and thrust in particular. And sometimes, honestly, needing to negate a couple of aces gives you a reason to put a 3rd spell. Like, you can Chalice, draw 2, thrust, and engage, and then start drawing like crazy. And obviously, talents, you're usually picking to draw 2 cards, but sometimes you'll need to shuffle a card back. Same sort of reason why you'd need to, like, discard with Ken. Triple Tactic Stress, if you're going first and get hand trapped normally, you're just setting imperm. That's good enough. I think the nerfs to the decks have honestly been pretty important to make this work. I found Bell is beatable, but you have to play it, like, really well. But it was, like, beatable to me. There were a couple of them, but they were playing Dragoon after Varudris had come out for some reason. It was outable, but I remember at least one of those games I timed out because I took too long to figure out the line. This is how it works. Multi-roll is how you win the grind game, long-term games. I think you could argue cutting it, honestly. But it's just so good long-term because it means you have, like, 6 Widow Anchors. It makes Shizuku into a search that immediately translates to something. I like playing it as a way to win a long-term game. You aren't winning fast. You'll note there's not rows. You can't do, like, linkage OTK quite the same way. You still technically can do OTK stuff. There's an important card in the extra deck we'll talk about in a second. That is there more for killing your opponent fast purposes rather than its actual utility, although I think its utility is good enough too. Then we have the Chalice. This just negates a card. The monster gains 400 attack. That was not relevant this time. I've had it previously in Sky Striker before, where I've unironically used this just to do the attack boost. Very painful when that happens, by the way. But that'll come up on rare occasions. Call by the Grave. This is just a crazy good interruption. You can hit a hand trap that's being a problem. Just a very flexible card. We're trying to go first. This is like an out to max C if you want to like combo off or need to combo off for whatever reason. Usually, due to the nature of this deck, like you only have like, what, 3, 4, 5 spells. You have like 6 cards that get rid of the monster on your field if you need to like turn on linkage or one of these other ones. I found it wasn't too big of a deal. You have a bunch of interaction that you can actually use when your opponent like maxes you or whatever. So I didn't find I was like, oh, I like super want Ash or anything. Call by the Grave is just good enough. 3 Widow Anchor. Stealing your opponent's monsters like really good for board breaking and stuff. And then drawing a card, ideally. Shark Cannon, I think 1's non-negotiable. Sometimes you just need to remove a card from your opponent. Monsters, specifically, from your opponent's graveyard. Sometimes you have to loop it because you're in a graveyard-heavy deck moment. Which is annoying, but it happens. Droplet, this is great. There are enough monsters where you can realistically stop certain annoying interactions with like Barone and stuff, and you even have Trap in this one, so hypothetically if like a freaking White Forest player goes crazy. I had a couple of games where I like almost broke White Forest boards, but honestly they usually end on like 3 Omni Negates minimum, which is really annoying. It's just really annoying to deal with. That's all I really have to say about that. But this deck is like surprisingly competent for breaking through boards still. Linkage, this is just a way to go into striker things. So for example, if like you draw 2, you might have a linkage in hand, but no other way into striker. You can like linkage, make Kagari, get back to linkage, and then Shizuku search for engage in end phase, for example. That would be something simple that might come up. Final Bringer of the End Times, this is a new card. This was the card I initially wanted to play and why I was trying to build a deck that goes first, because I think being able to Widow Anchor, steal, and then get rid of your monster through like Droplet or Final Bringer of the End Times is like an important thing where you can like use more striker spells again. Because like ending up with like 2 Widow Anchors and 2 uncommon in like a longer game, or in a game where like this deck does its ideal like draw 2, search engage line, and like loops engage a couple times where you like search multi-roll, get a second Widow Anchor, and then like get to set the Final Bringer or Droplet. It's just really powerful to be able to do that. And Imperm is Imperm. Sometimes you have a hand trap, and sometimes that'll be relevant, and you can like stop your opponent from doing something, and sometimes, yeah. We go to the extra deck. 3 Kagari, 2 Shizuku. You can get away with running 2 Shizuku. That's why you're running 2 Shizuku. 2 Hayate. I think you could hypothetically cut this down to 1. I wouldn't advise it, but you can. I have Kaina, which is here for killing your opponent's reasons. Because sometimes you need a different name, but also need to be able to link it off in the case your opponent has like a Bastille or something. Those are the link ones that we're playing that aren't Almirage. Almirage is here, so if you normal summon Gen, you can make Almirage and activate like Engage afterwards. Typhon's here, your opponent goes, they do a crazy combo. You can do a couple of like normal striker plays, and then instead of making Shizuku, you can make Typhon. It's big, you can run over something, and you can bounce something. And like stop like Barone or something like that if that's relevant. It comes up enough to be fine. I wouldn't consider it as mandatory as like an Almirage. I will say what this deck is missing is a link one that you can link off a couple of aces for. I looked over them, and unless I missed something, there's nothing that you can use when you special summon this card, which is annoying. Besides that, we have Zeke. It's just like generally good removal. This is probably the most cuttable one. If you wanted to play access code, I'd probably choose to cut the Zeke. But I don't love doing that. Azalea's very good, just because the pop, being able to pop any monster on field is pretty relevant. Being able to pop something in battle can actually come up, and I had it come up a couple of times. Just being able to run over something by battle, sort of, is pretty relevant for this deck, because all of your guys are really small, and we're not running like an access code line here, as you can see. Camellia, this is usually the way you'll turn like a couple of aces plus like again and turn it into your Sky Striker line. You can Foolish something. I'd usually end up Foolishing Linkage, because at that point you don't need it. You just want spells in graveyard to draw off of Engage. And SP Little Knight. Usually you make this when you want to banish something from the graveyard that is not a monster. In my experience, at least. That's what I mostly use this for. Sometimes you need to banish a back row or something. Sometimes you'll do, like, Azalea pop something on board, and then Little Knight pop, banish something on board, or vice versa, usually. Because you'll have, like, I don't know, an extra Gen or Ken in hand. And then we have Engage 0. Now, if you're unfamiliar with the words on linkage, you will notice it does not mention that you have to have Rain, Rose, and Graveyard. It's a light and a dark Sky Striker Ace monster. I think Engage 0 is worth it enough for making linkage and interruption on your opponent's turn sometimes. The Raigeki effect on this card, literally in no version of Sky Striker has the Raigeki effect on Engage 0 come up. I dream of the day it does. Obviously in this version it won't, because I'm not playing Rose at all. But that's not relevant. But what it is it is a Sky Striker Ace card at all times. It's a light monster. So if you summon this, and you have Ray in Graveyard, or Camellia, or Azalea, or Zeke, this will summon it with the extra 1,000 attack. So you can start doing your, like, linkage OTK stuff, and actually, like, dealing damage in a short amount of time, where you don't feel a desperate need to, like, have access code in there. Access code to me is usually either occasional cleanup duty, something like Typhon, but cleans up different board states, or is just, like, big punch, so I can actually end the game before the Heat Death of the Universe. I find that if I have enough material to make access code, I'm probably winning the game anyways, which is why I've opted to play Typhon and Almirage and, like, Zeke, because the idea is I'm much more concerned about getting to the point where I could summon access code, because unless my opponent has a Link 3 to special summon off of Shark Cannon, it's very unlikely that you're going to be able to just make an access code that actually helps you get to parity with your opponent. In my experience, at least. That's why I'm not running access code. I think it is deceptively mediocre in this deck. That is my opinion on the card. Not that it's bad or anything. Like, I think Typhon's like, eh. This is one of the few decks where you'll, like, summon Typhon and you will be like, oh, I don't immediately lose. Yeah. This is the funny deck list. I think I already talked about the win rates, where 67.9% win rate over 53 games. I think that's on the luckier side of things. But I played 150 games before this, and my win rate was like 51, almost basically 52%. Overall win rate was 56. This climb was very miserable, and most of it was just me being stuck in Diamond. Like I said, before I moved on to this deck list, I was struggling to go first. This list was going first and was winning games. One thing, you'll look at this list and you'll say, what about Tempai? I had one where I got double Fuwa lost, and I still won that game, because I'm going to level with you. This deck list, in my experience, does the following against Tempai. You look your opponent dead in the eye and you go, you simply did not draw Harpy's Feather Duster, or Lightning Storm, or Heavy Storm. And if they didn't, you win. And if they did, you lose. Like, that is my experience playing against that deck with this one. For a long grind game, you win, and usually Sengen Kaiman is notably at 1. So usually they have to get to it, and you just have enough ways to get out of that situation. It's literally all about, can they blow up all of your back row? And if they draw a way to do that, you just auto-lose. Not surprising, but when you get rid of all your interaction, you die. It's also why sometimes, if I have, like, I don't know, Chalice, Widow Anchor, and then just, like, whatever on board, I'll, like, sometimes hold Imperm in hand. Or maybe it's, like, Droplet with a monster, Chalice, Imperm, and maybe there was something dead in hand or something weird. I'll like hold the imperm in hand so that if I get like lightning stormed or something, or importantly, sometimes you'll brick on just not having an actual play, and that will come up where you just want to play on lightning storm and hold like an imperm in hand because all of your interaction on the field you'll remove anyways. Yeah, this deck worked shockingly well. For changes, the only other thing I think you could consider is enemy controller. I think it fulfills a similar role as Final Bringer of the End Times and Droplet of getting rid of a monster you control. There's a big problem with this, is it gives you a different one. It gives you the opponent's monster. Now, your opponent can summon something like Fenrir, in which case it becomes good. However, that's not guaranteed, and it can make some awkward moments, even more awkward moments than, like, needing to, like, Final Bringer before being able to activate second Widow Anchor. But I do think Widow Anchor, enemy controller's under consideration. But I was messing around with it and Final Bringer, and originally I didn't want to play multiple Final Bringer because it has a hard once return on it. And then I just determined it was better. It's more likely to be alive against back row you need to remove. We're not playing Afterburners in this deck list, which is a card I love, by the way. It's such a shame. But I didn't want to play dead cards going first. I wanted to be winning the coin toss going first. And I found Widow Anchor with 3 spells in graveyard was just good enough. Like, it was just enough. So it wasn't worth, like, playing a brick in my deck that I didn't want to draw. Every other card in here is, like, fine. The only thing is, like, drawing multiple Final Bringer of the End Times can be a little awkward sometimes. Important fact, if you, it's less important in this one. If you're playing a more normal striker list, though, if you have Ray on field and Final Bringer of the End Times, you can... I mean, you could do a very funny thing, by the way. You could normal summon a Ray, activate multi-roll, multi-roll target Ray, then activate Final Bringer of the End Times, target Ray, target whatever you want to destroy of your opponents, and then you can activate Ray effect after that. You can also do this with the Striker Field spell, Area 0, if you want to. Because multi-roll, Area 0, Final Bringer of the End Times, they don't actually need to do the part of destroying / sending the card to the graveyard. So multi-roll will make it so right here, because it says send that card to the graveyard, also your opponent. So because it says also, it means both things happen at the same time. So even if it doesn't send Ray to graveyard, you still get the effect so they can't respond to your spell cards for the rest of the turn. Area 0 is similar. Target, excavate 3 cards, you can add 1. And then for this one, it's because you get to do the add before sending the card. So if the card's gone, it doesn't care about it. And then for Final Bringer, it just says destroy them, which means it tries to destroy both cards. And it doesn't... so if one's gone, it'll still try to destroy the other one because it doesn't say... I think both would mean that it would need to still be there. So those are just, like, fun dodges you can do. Sometimes you'll be using, like, Final Bringer to, like... Kagari, target, engage, and then they'll imperm, and then you can, like, Final Bringer, target, Kagari, target something, an important target on your opponent's field. They're just, like, neat ways you can use it to dodge. The unfortunate part of that one is it means you have to get back on the Striker Engine, which usually means you have to, like, search linkage or something. But yeah, I found this deck surprisingly effective. I'd say you have to play it pretty well. Sometimes you need to get a little lucky, but it went well. I started winning games once I played this one. I think the primary difference between this one and the versions I was playing before is the ones before I was counting on my opponent to, like, activate a hand trap or something, and if they didn't, I couldn't do anything, basically. And so this one says, screw that, I have these cards that allow me to generate advantage, or rip cards out of your hand and activate cards effects. And if you don't, then I don't care. In a world where you get max seed or something, you have a ton of cards that you can just set and pass, and you have, you know, like 3 or 4 interactions with, like, no setup. But if you do get your setup, you can get, like, some crazy draws going. Ideally, for this deck, an ideal game, you'll have gone first. You'll have, like, drawn 2, discarded 1. You'll have drawn 2 off a couple of aces. You'll have, like, 4 set cards and a multi-roll, or just 5 set cards, and, like, 3 more cards in hand. And the idea is basically you stop your opponent from doing anything super crazy, and then you just combo off like crazy on the next turn. and destroy what little board they made through your interruptions, if they could do anything through it. It's not uncommon that you can, like, just completely stop them because of the sheer amount of stuff you can do. But yeah, I found this had a good matchup against Tenpai with the hits, as long as they don't draw the back row removal, which is literally like a coin flip on that. I think it's like 50-50 whether or not they'll have any. I can actually check on a hypergeometric calculator. Let's say they play 4 mass back row wipes. You only care if they have 1. So it'd literally be like if they're playing if they're playing Heavy Storm, Harpy's Feather Duster, and they're also playing 2 Lightning Storm, they literally have a 49% chance of drawing at least one of those. Like I said, it's basically a coin flip. If they have it, they have it. If they don't, you're probably fine. But yeah. I think this deck went really well. Also, for Tenpai, by the way, it's why it can sometimes be worth it to have, like, a searched Shark Cannon if you think you have enough normal effect negation. So if they hard draw the field spell, they can't make the 10 before the battle phase, because you can just Shark Cannon grab the Biden target. Or if you have Called By, that works too. But yeah, I didn't see a lot of Tenpai this time. The hits seemed to make them disappear for me. I've seen other people say they were running into them. I have no idea how popular they are. The deck still seems like fairly strong, but just not as popular. Yeah, I had a lot of fun with this deck list. The ones before were a little iffy and a little slow, but I had a good climb overall. If you want to mess with a couple of aces and probably what is the most realistic way to play it, this is probably it. Alternative notes, if you really want to go in on turning on Thrust, you can play 2 more Ken. I disagree with that. If you want to be high rolly, you could play, like, I wouldn't say necessarily just high rolly. Morganite's like a consideration in the sense that, like I said, in an ideal world, if you get everything off and drew a really good hand, you'll have extra cards in hand, and Time-Tearing Morganite really sets you up for a long game. It does turn off a couple of aces, but at that point you're just drawing free cards anyway, so you might as well. Yeah, I don't think Ray's crazy important to be engraved. Ray's really good, don't get me wrong. That's why Ray's in the deck. If I didn't think Ray was important at all, Ray wouldn't even be in the deck. But also Ray's like an important search target to have off of like Engage if you don't have any of the rest of your guys. You can just go search Kagari. If you're used to like playing Striker and like playing around stuff, I've had it before where like I'll search Ray off of Engage, normal Ray, make Kagari. I've had the maxi, and then I happen to have like linkage in hand, and I just like change linkage, and they immediately surrender. I've had like funny moments like that. Yeah, this deck list is one I enjoyed and came up with myself. I'm done talking about it. I don't have anything else interesting to say. I hope you enjoyed watching this for some reason. All right, bye.